Welcome to the Hindu Daily. Today, we're diving deep into a collection of impactful articles from today's newspaper. We'll be covering quite a range, shifting global geopolitics, some critical social issues, groundbreaking science, and even the very nature of identity. Our mission, as always, is to pull out the most important insights, maybe some surprising facts, just to help you get well-informed, quickly, and thoroughly. So first up, from the editorial section, we're looking at what seems like a really significant shift in, well, global geopolitics. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, he's announced the UK's commitment to recognizing Palestinian statehood. Possibly quite soon, maybe September, unless, Israel ends the war in Gaza and moves towards a two-state framework. This feels like a monumental moment, doesn't it? Especially, 108 years after the Balfour Declaration. And it looks like France, Canada, Australia might be thinking along similar lines. So the article asks this crucial question: why? Why are these nations, longtime allies of Israel, now considering such a, radical shift?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it's important to understand this isn't some sudden, moral awakening in the global north. Lots of countries in the global south, like India, for example, recognized Palestinian sovereignty decades ago. What's really compelling here, and what the article focuses on, is why these Western nations, traditionally Israel's staunchest allies, are moving now. And it points to two key explanations. First, these accusations that Israel is committing genocide, they're not just fringe discussions anymore.
Right, they've become much more mainstream, haven't they?
Exactly. You've got the International Criminal Court issuing an arrest warrant for Prime Minister Netanyahu. The International Court of Justice is formally examining the genocide charge. And even within Israel itself, respected rights groups like B'Tselem, Physicians for Human Rights Israel, alongside big international bodies, Amnesty, Médecins Sans Frontières, they've accused the IDF of genocide.
Wow. And the numbers from Gaza cited in the article are just devastating.
They are truly shocking. In just 22 months, 2.6% of the pre-war population killed, 6.5% wounded, over 18,000 children dead. Add to that the total blockade, weaponized hunger they talk about, over 1,000 Palestinians killed just trying to get aid. The article calls this systemic violence unprecedented in recent history. It's hard to ignore.
Okay, so that's the first major factor. What's the second one?
The second one is a really decisive shift in international public opinion, how people around the world are viewing this. Recent YouGov polls, for instance, show that only about 13% to 21% of people in Western Europe now have a favorable view of Israel. Support for the war itself has dropped, like as low as 6% in some places.
Even in the U.S., Israel's biggest ally.
Even in the U.S., yeah. Dissent is definitely growing. An Economist YouGov survey found only 27% of Americans support Mr. Netanyahu, but a striking 84% back an immediate ceasefire, and almost half, nearly half, now believe Israel is committing genocide.
So that kind of global pressure, that condemnation, that must be making it really hard for traditional allies to just stick to the old script.
That's exactly the point the article makes. It's becoming increasingly difficult.
So the piece suggests Israel is clearly feeling the heat from its allies, losing that global public opinion battle. And it argues that, ending the war would seem like the logical step, but Netanyahu's regime, as the article puts it, seems driven by this settler expansionist neo-Zionist ideology. It makes it hard for them to stop. His political survival seems tied to keeping the conflict going, maybe avoiding corruption charges, accountability for October 7th. And he's pushing for what he calls a no-state solution for Palestinians. This is where it gets really interesting, isn't it?
That phrase, no-state solution, yeah, it really gets to a deeper, more structural problem the article digs into. It's linked to revisionist Zionism, the settlers' desire for Lebensraum.
Living space.
Living space, exactly. A term with, heavy historical baggage. You have figures like Finance Minister Smotrich openly calling for Gaza to be totally destroyed. Defense Minister Katz proposing pushing Palestinians into concentration camps in Rafah.
Which even former Israeli PMs are criticizing.
Yeah, Ehud Olmert is cited as criticizing this vision. The idea seems to be if Palestinians are expelled or confined, Jewish settlers can return to Gaza. There's a quote from Milan Kundera the article uses. "The struggle of a man against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting." For decades, the article argues, the organized remembrance of the Shoah, the Holocaust, has sometimes been used to sort of shield the Israeli state from criticism. But now, the organized and systemic violence in Gaza, tragically live-streamed to millions worldwide, is, according to the article, forging a new collective conscience about the Palestinian Nakbas.
The Nakbas, the catastrophe of 1948.
Exactly. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the article concludes that while this recognition by allies might not immediately change things on the ground, It marks a breaking moment, a real shift in the post-1948 consensus about Israel in the West.
Historical turning point, as you
Well, a
say.
historical turning point,
Yeah.
yeah.
So why does this matter to you, listening? It really means understanding how international law, these big shifts in public opinion and political leadership, all tangle together to shape global events. What's happening now is historically significant. It's redefining long-held positions. It affects the future of a whole region, global stability, and how we talk about human rights. Okay, from those high-stakes global power shifts, let's bring it back home, in a way, to a deeply personal but equally vital issue for millions in India, the silent crisis of organ donation. The numbers here are just, well, stark. Over 500,000 lives lost every year because there just aren't enough donor organs. Even though transplants have increased recently, India's donation rate is incredibly low, 0.8 per million. Compare that to over 45 per million in places like Spain or the U.S. It's a huge gap.
It is a massive gap, and the article explains that it's largely down to these deep-seated myths and misconceptions, things that discourage families from saying yes to donation after a loved one passes away.
But these myths can be tackled, right?
Absolutely. They can and should be busted with facts. For instance, a really common concern is that donation disfigures the body, messing up funeral rites. That's just not true. Organ retrieval is done with the utmost respect and care. The donor's appearance is preserved for viewing for the final ceremonies. And religious leaders across different faiths have actually affirmed that donation is an act of compassion. It aligns with spiritual values. It's crucial to understand how these sensitivities are respected medically.
Okay, that's one major myth. What else comes up?
Another really pervasive one is the fear that hospital staff might, declare brain death too early just to harvest organs.
That sounds quite sinister.
It does, but
Maybe.
the article firmly debunks it. Declaring brain death isn't some casual decision. It follows a really strict legal and clinical framework under India's Transplantation of Human Organs and Tissues Act from 1994. It involves rigorous medical criteria, a whole board of experts from different fields, repeated assessments, thorough documentation. It's designed to ensure an unbiased and absolutely irreversible confirmation of neurological death.
So very stringent checks and balances.
Extremely stringent. And then there's the misunderstanding about age or health limits. People think you have to be young and perfectly healthy. While some organs are best from younger donors, sure, many others, kidneys, liver segments, lungs, corneas can actually come from older donors or even people who die of natural causes. The article really emphasizes that every contribution counts. Even things like bone, skin, heart valves can save or dramatically improve lives. The scope is much wider than people think.
Okay, so knowing the facts helps bust the myths.
Yeah.
But what can actually be done to increase awareness and really boost those donation rates?
The article suggests several key things. Sustained education campaigns using things like audiovisual content, maybe real stories from donors and recipients. Those can be powerful. Also, community workshops led by trained counselors, integrating organ donation education into schools and colleges, and crucially, training healthcare professionals so they can have those compassionate, sensitive conversations with families at a really difficult time.
That sounds sensible. Any policy ideas mentioned?
Yes. One particularly promising policy proposal discussed is presumed consent. It's a system that countries like Spain and Croatia have used successfully. Basically, under this model, every adult is considered an organ donor unless they explicitly opt out or register an objection.
That's quite a shift from the current opt-in system.
It is, and it raises that important question. How can we as a society foster this shift towards seeing donation as a norm, as this life-saving act? The article calls it a profound act of charity, a noble legacy.
So the critical takeaway here for you, the listener, it's maybe an encouragement to think about it. Consider registering as a donor yourself. And just as importantly, talk about it with your family. Make your wishes known. Organ donation is, as the article says, a lifeline. Your decision could directly impact so many lives, offering that incredible gift of continued life. All right, shifting gears now, we're moving to the opinion section, diving into an article that takes a critical look at India's approach to job creation, specifically the Employment-Linked Incentive, or ELI, scheme. This scheme got a huge outlay, nearly 99,500 crore rupees, a really ambitious attempt to generate employment. Let's unpack this one.
Ambitious, definitely. But the article immediately flags some serious concerns about the ELI scheme's design. It argues it's very employer-centric, meaning it focuses on giving incentives to employers, especially in manufacturing, but kind of overlooks the bigger problem, the mismatch between people's skills, their employability, and the actual opportunities available.
Okay, so it might not be addressing the root cause.
Potentially not. The worry is it could actually promote what they call capital-labor asymmetries, basically strengthening the employer's bargaining power. This could lead to wider wage gaps and maybe marginalize low-skilled workers or those in the informal sector. And there's data to back this up. The article cites the Economic Survey 2024-25, which paints a pretty grim picture of the skill mismatch. Only about 8.25% of graduates are employed in jobs that actually match their qualifications. Over 53% are underemployed, working in semi-skilled or even elementary jobs.
Wow, more than half.
More than half. And get this, only 4.9% of young people in India, aged 15 to 29, have received any formal vocational training. So the argument is, without a really robust skilling infrastructure in place first, the ELI scheme might just end up paying employers to absorb an unprepared workforce rather than creating genuinely skilled, sustainable jobs.
That makes sense. What other issues does the article raise?
Another major one is the scheme's exclusion of the informal sector. It prioritizes formal economy firms, the ones registered with the EPFO, India's Social Security Organization.
Right, but that leaves out most people, doesn't it?
It leaves out about 90% of India's labor force. The vast majority work informally, without Social Security, without stable employment protection. So the design risks creating these structural inequalities, right? Funneling public money towards relatively well-off companies while neglecting the huge informal workforce. And there's another worry. The scheme could inadvertently normalize disguised unemployment.
Disguised unemployment. What does that mean exactly?
It means companies might just, relabel existing jobs as new employment simply to claim the subsidy without actually increasing overall productivity or creating genuine new roles, so shuffling things around on paper.
I see. And you mentioned manufacturing earlier.
Yes, the article points out a sectoral blind spot. The scheme focuses disproportionately on manufacturing, but manufacturing contributes less than 13% to total employment in India, and its ability to absorb labor, its employment elasticity, is actually declining because of automation and other factors.
So it's betting on the wrong horse, maybe.
Well, it might be marginalizing workers in sectors where most people actually work, like agriculture and services, which account for nearly 70% of the workforce. Women, rural youth, informal workers are more likely to be in those sectors. The scheme seems based on this slightly outdated idea that manufacturing is the main engine for jobs, and it maybe doesn't quite fit the current economic reality.
Okay, so if this employer-centric approach, focused on manufacturing and formal jobs, has these significant drawbacks, especially for the 90% in the informal sector, what's the alternative? What would a truly equitable job strategy look like? Is it even possible with just one scheme?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The article argues for a different approach, focusing on crucial solutions. Instead of just counting jobs, the focus needs to be on substantial investment in skilling and education reforms, things that actually help low-skilled workers improve their prospects, and shifting the goal from just short-term job numbers to creating long-term sustainable opportunities. Opportunities that also enhance productivity, but without compromising workers' rights.
So a more holistic approach.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the article suggests the scheme's current design could actually widen the existing divides in India's labor market, rather than closing them. What's really needed, it argues, is a more equitable and sustainable development strategy overall, one that addresses India's unique employment challenges head-on, not just through these kinds of incentives.
So the biggest takeaway for you, listening to this, it's really about understanding the complexities behind national economic policies. The job market realities can be harsh, and it highlights the huge challenges in making sure development is genuinely equitable and sustainable for everyone, especially in such a diverse economy like India's. Makes you question the real impact of these big-ticket schemes. Okay, let's shift gears completely now. We're plunging into the fascinating world of quantum physics, specifically this enduring mystery around a particle called the muon. It's an elementary particle, right? Like an electron, but much heavier.
Much heavier, yeah. A whopping 207 times heavier than an electron, which famously led the physicist Azadeh Rabi to ask, who ordered that? It seemed kind of superfluous in the grand scheme of particles back then.
Huh. Right. So what's the mystery we're talking about today?
The core mystery is the muon's anomalous magnetic moment, often called G-2 or G-2. Theoretically, its G factor, which relates its magnetic moment to its spin, should be exactly 2. But because of weird quantum effects, particles popping in and out of existence around it, its value deviates just slightly from 2. And the Muon G2 experiment at Fermilab in the US has measured this property with absolutely unprecedented precision. We're talking 0.127 parts per million. It's incredible accuracy.
Okay, incredibly precise measurement. But what's the problem?
Well, what's truly compelling here is that physicists usually check these kinds of measurements against the predictions of the Standard Model, our best theory of fundamental particles and forces. But in this case, there are actually two distinct ways to calculate the theoretical prediction within the Standard Model, and crucially, they don't quite agree with each other.
Ah, so the theory itself is a bit fuzzy here. And this isn't a new issue, is it? I remember reading there's been some drama around this for decades.
Oh, absolutely. An intriguing drama, as you say. The first hints came from CERN back in 1961. Then, the Brookhaven E821 experiment in the U.S. late 90s really solidified things. They found a significant disagreement between their measurement and the traditional theoretical prediction from the Standard Model.
Right, the one based on Feynman diagrams.
Exactly. And for years, this discrepancy got physicists really excited. People started speculating about new physics, maybe undiscovered particles or forces influencing the muon to explain the gap. Then, Fermilab released its first results in 2021. They lined up perfectly with the Brookhaven data, seemingly confirming the discrepancy, deepening the mystery. It looked like new physics was just around the corner.
But then there was a twist.
A crucial twist, yeah. On the very same day Fermilab announced those results, a theoretical group called the Budapest-Marseille-Wuppertal, or BMW, Lattice Collaboration, published a paper in Nature. They used a completely different method to calculate the theoretical value using powerful computer simulations called Lattice QCD instead of Feynman diagrams. And the results suggested maybe there's no gap after all. Maybe the Standard Model prediction is actually closer to the experimental value than we thought.
So two different theoretical answers, essentially.
Pretty much. And Fermilab's final results, just announced in June, are consistent with their own past findings and Brookhaven's. So the experimental side seems solid, but the theoretical contrast between the two calculation methods remains, as the article says, unsettled.
Okay, so the experiment is solid, but the theory is debated. How are scientists actually doing the experiment, and what's next to try and resolve this quantum puzzle? This is where it gets really ingenious.
The setup is truly brilliant, almost sci-fi. They inject a beam of antimuons, the muon's antimatter twin, into this huge 15-meter-wide storage ring. It contains an incredibly precise magnetic field. Inside the ring, these tiny antimuons zoom around in circles, orbiting at a specific frequency. But at the same time, their intrinsic spin, think of it like a tiny internal compass, also rotates or precesses in the magnetic field, but at a slightly different frequency.
Wow, okay.
And the genius part is they measure the tiny difference between that orbit frequency and the spin frequency. That difference directly tells them the value of Gini 2, the anomalous magnetic moment. It really is. Now, since both the Brookhaven and Fermilab experiments used pretty similar equipment, the article highlights there's a crucial need for a completely independent measurement using a different experimental approach, just to be absolutely sure. And there's an upcoming effort at the Japan Proton Accelerator Research Complex, JPARC, that aims to do just that. Hopefully that will provide some definitive clarity. As the article wisely concludes, uncertainty is an old friend of fundamental physics. It has always borne the promise of an imminent disclosure of a deep secret of nature. These little discrepancies are often where the breakthroughs happen.
So how does this reshape your understanding of physics? Well, it helps you grasp how this cutting-edge science probes the very fabric of reality. It shows how tiny, almost imperceptible differences in measurements can actually be the keys that unlock revolutionary discoveries. Maybe unseen forces, new particles that could fundamentally change how we understand the universe. It's a great reminder that what we think we know is always evolving. Okay, now in the text section, let's talk about a technology that's really changing our world quite rapidly: satellite internet. With Elon Musk's Starlink supposedly about to debut in India, this tech is tackling some core problems that our traditional ground-based networks face. You know, it's often not economical to lay cables in sparsely populated areas, ground networks are vulnerable to natural disasters, and you don't really have good connectivity when you're on the move.
Absolutely. Satellite internet really steps in here as a powerful solution. It offers extensive coverage, resilient coverage, pretty much regardless of the terrain or what terrestrial infrastructure exists or doesn't exist. And what's really striking, as the article points out, is its dual-use nature. It serves both civilian and military purposes.
Right, like the examples they gave.
Exactly. On the civilian side, during Hurricane Harvey in 2017, something like 70% of cell towers got knocked out. Viasat's satellite internet became an indispensable lifeline for coordinating rescue operations. Militarily, SpaceX's Starlink has been absolutely pivotal for Ukrainian defense forces, coordinating troop movements, operating drones, even bypassing Russian jamming attempts. And the Indian Army is using it too on the Siachen Glacier, one of the highest battlefields in the world, for operational readiness.
But there's a downside to that borderless nature too, right?
There is. That ease of access also means it can be used illicitly. The article mentions security forces in India confiscating smuggled Starlink devices from insurgent groups, from drug rackets. These examples really drive home the point that control over satellite internet infrastructure is fast becoming a new dimension of national power and national security.
That's a truly powerful statement. Could you maybe give us a simplified rundown of how the tech works, especially the different orbits these satellites use?
Sure. So, broadly speaking, satellites operate in three main orbits. First, you've got geostationary Earth orbit, GEO. This is really high up, around 36,000 kilometers. These satellites match the Earth's rotation, so they appear fixed over one spot. One satellite can cover almost a third of the Earth. Viasat uses this. The big drawback is latency, the time delay, because the signal has to travel so far. Not great for real-time stuff like video calls.
Okay, GEO is high, wide coverage, high latency. What else?
Then there's medium Earth orbit, MEO. This is kind of a compromise altitude between 2,000 and 36,000 kilometers. Latency is lower than GEO, but you still need a constellation, a group of satellites, for global coverage. The O3b system is an example. And finally, the one getting all the attention now, low Earth orbit, ILE. This is where Starlink operates. These orbit much closer to Earth, below 2,000 kilometers.
So latency is much lower.
Much, much lower, almost like fiber optic speeds. The satellites themselves can be smaller, cheaper to build and launch, but the trade-off is that each one covers a tiny area, maybe like a single city. So to get global coverage, you need thousands of them working together in these mega constellations. Starlink already has over 7,000 up there, and they're planning for potentially up to 42,000.
42,000. That's incredible.
It really is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, these LEO mega constellations are fundamentally changing global connectivity.
And the innovations are pretty amazing too. Things like onboard signal processing, these optical links between satellites creating a true internet in the sky, seamless handoffs as satellites whiz overhead. Costs are still a bit high, maybe terminals around $500, monthly service about $50. But the future seems to promise even more accessibility, like direct-to-smartphone services, which would be a game changer.
Absolutely. And the applications go way beyond just getting broadband to remote areas. Think about the Internet of Everything, or IoE, enhancing navigation for self-driving cars, powering smart cities, enabling telemedicine and remote patient monitoring, especially in rural places, revolutionizing farming, environmental monitoring. The list goes on.
It sounds transformative.
It really is vast and transformative, but it also brings complex security and regulatory challenges. As the article stresses, nations now see satellite internet as this new dimension of power. For countries like India, it's crucial to develop comprehensive strategies, how to integrate this into national resilience plans, how to use it to genuinely bridge the digital divide for millions, and how to actively participate in shaping its international governance.
So how does this reshape your understanding of connectivity? It's about seeing how your own digital life might fundamentally change, and understanding how this tech redefines national power, redefines access for everyone, potentially, no matter where they are on Earth, bridging vast distances with these invisible links in the sky. Okay, to conclude our deep dive today, let's turn to a really profound reflection on identity and belonging. This is prompted by recent incidents, mentioned in the article, involving harassment and even deportation of Bengali migrant workers in India, suspected of being illegal migrants from Bangladesh. Let's try and unpack the core arguments here.
Yeah, this issue of hyphenated nationality, as the article calls it, it's certainly not new in India. We've seen similar dynamics historically with the treatment of Muslims, Sri Lankan Tamils, people from the Northeast in Indian cities, Indian Nepalis. They've often been treated as medics, that's an old term from ancient Greece, referring to residents, often foreigners, who kind of enjoyed citizenship benefits, but were seen by some as doing so illegitimately.
And this isn't just an Indian phenomena, right?
Not at all. What's fascinating here is how widespread this is. The article gives examples. The Muhajir problem in Pakistan, the Madhizi issue in Nepal, the Tamil situation in Sri Lanka, even similar tensions in the U.S. It seems to be this universal struggle where citizens' loyalty gets judged based on perceived ethnic or territorial ties, often completely regardless of their actual legal citizenship.
The article brings in the French philosopher Etienne Balibar to help explain this.
Yes, Balibar's ideas are really insightful here. He talks about how modern nationality defines itself by its ancestors' sacred heritage. This creates a drive for assimilation, but also has this darker side of domination and exclusion. Genuine nationality, in this view, demands unambiguous loyalty. It needs to be rooted in some kind of civilizational core within defined territorial borders.
Which explains why these hyphenated communities get linked to an ethnic homeland elsewhere.
Exactly. So an Indian Muslim might be linked, in some people's minds, to Pakistan, or in the current case, Bengali workers in India are linked to Bangladesh simply because they speak Bengali, even if they are fully legal Indian citizens. Their language becomes a marker of suspicion.
And this relates to a fundamental paradox of the nation-state itself.
Right. The article argues this goes back to the Westphalian Treaty of 1648 and its formula of one nation equals one state. Nation-states are caught in this inherent contradiction. On one hand, they need diversity for economic reasons, cultural richness, but on the other hand, they demand homogeneity for political unity, for a strong national identity. It's this unsolvable puzzle.
And how does Homi Bhabha's work fit in here?
Post-colonial theorist Homi Bhabha talks about how nation-states create identity through two things: pedagogical instruction, that's the official stuff, the laws, the documents, the Constitution, and performative strategy, that's the lived experience, how identity is actually performed and perceived in daily life. And for these Bengali migrant workers, having authentic legal documents, the pedagogical proof of citizenship, wasn't enough. Their performative narrative, simply being heard speaking Bengali in a Hindi-speaking region, that overrode everything. That's what led to the harassment. The performance trumped the paperwork. That's where the tension really lies.
It feels so ironic, doesn't it? We live in this globalized age where goods, money, technology zip across borders freely. But nation-states often seem to cling tighter to these exclusionary rules, especially when it comes to people. To labor. Why is that?
Precisely. The article argues that this harassment isn't just some isolated incident or, political opportunism. It reflects a deeper structural contradiction that's inherent in the Western nation-state model, which many countries, including India, have adopted. Bureaucratic things like the census or voter registration, they actually expose this paradox. But the article points out that the same kind of double identification happens at other scales, too, even within India. We associate Biharis with Bihar, Marwaris with Rajasthan, and so on. While these might not always be framed as national threats, that kind of reasoning has definitely fueled interstate rivalries and tensions historically.
So the underlying logic is similar, even if the target changes.
Exactly. The fundamental structure of how we define belonging by conflating ethnic or linguistic ties with territorial loyalty that remains the same. The forms it takes just keep shifting. And this raises a really important question for all of us. If the very way we create national belonging also inherently creates exclusion, how can we ever truly accommodate the complex, messy realities of identity in our diverse, interconnected world?
So what's your biggest takeaway from this really profound discussion? It's about understanding national identity, citizenship, and those inherent tensions within the very concept of belonging in modern societies. It really challenges us to look beyond simple definitions, simple labels, and recognize these deep structural forces that are constantly at play, often quietly shaping our lives and interactions. As we've explored today, the lines between what we perceive, what gets reported, and what is fundamentally true, well, they're constantly being redrawn. Whether that's in global politics or the very fabric of reality with quantum physics, or even in how we understand our own national identity. What new collective consciences, maybe unseen right now, are being forged that will redefine our understanding of the world tomorrow. Thank you for listening. If today's episode gave you something useful, consider following us on Spotify so you're the first to hear the next one. You can give suggestions by contacting our Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we're eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.